So, South of Midnight is a brand new IP, a very unique one, made by Compulsion Games. And if you haven't heard of them or aren't familiar, they made games such as We Few Happy back in 2018 and Contrast, which was released on the Xbox 360 back in 2013. But you don't really need to know these games to be interested in South of Midnight, because in comparison, this title stands out in pretty much every aspect when pitted against the previous titles of this developer. And this is actually a game that's been on my radar for quite some time, because it was originally announced during the Xbox showcase back in 2023, and the art style really caught my eye. And luckily enough, I was gifted a preview copy of the game, and after playing it, I have some thoughts and I want to go over it with you. And also, leading up to making this review, I made some short form videos announcing that I had early access to this game and that I requested you guys give me some questions you might have about it. So I'll either be answering those directly, or if I answer it while describing things that I experienced in the game, I'll overlay the question on the screen. Next is that this is going to be a very short-sighted look into the game, because we only got access to one chapter, so forming any kind of opinion on what you can expect late game is just not possible to do accurately, so keep that in mind as we're going over things. And lastly, before we get started, there was a brief we had to go over that addressed a few bugs that the devs are currently dealing with, and that this preview build is not an accurate representation of what the final build will be, because they're still adding layers of polish. So I'll point them out later, but I won't harp on them too much, because it's good to know that they're already on the devs' radar to clean up before the game comes out. But enough on all of that. I got my notes right here and my questions from my viewers, so let's talk about what I played. And we're actually going to start with a really good question from RefaxL on Instagram, who asked about gameplay structure. And for this particular title, it's not my favorite when it comes to games, but it's still fine. They had a vision and they executed on it. But basically, from what I played that took place in chapter 3, the levels are, or this level was, very linear in design, with a few areas that branch off to find collectibles or notes that add to the lore, and even these things called floofs that act as currency to unlock new passive and active abilities. Then ultimately you reach these arena section areas where you'll fight like several enemies, and once you clear that out, you'll be able to progress through the rest of the stage. And what something with this gameplay model ends up looking like, and I want to open up Paint for my visual learners here. And so basically what you end up having is the start of the level, and you have one linear path. And then there'll be some branching out sections here and there where you'll find a collectible or a floof to add to your currency and buy your power-ups. But then ultimately, you'll end up at an arena section where you'll fight various enemies. And chapter 3 was very rinse and repeat of this. You could explore a little bit, but it was by no means any kind of open world. So, and you did this a lot. There was like 4 times you had to fight a group of enemies to collect something for the main mission. And what this did was it kind of gave me this feeling that the tempo was like this. It had the highs and the lows. And the thing for me with games that follow this is sometimes these sections of the games can be a little flat or boring. At least for me, that's how it felt. Because personally, I like some enemies on the way to the next objective, similar to something like Devil May Cry or Evil West, where you were going from point A to point B. There'd be some enemies kind of speckled throughout the level, but then there would be these big sections where you were fighting off, huge hordes of enemies. To some degree. But also part of me understands that this is probably by design, so that way the player can enjoy the other aspects of the game, like the art direction with the world design, which is beautiful, and the music, which we'll talk a little bit more in depth here in a moment. But me just being a combat oriented person, like having enemies to attack on the way to the next objective is more enjoyable, but absolutely not a dig at this game. It's just my personal preference, because I believe fully that they're making up for the lulls in combat with that art and music direction. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time talking about this section, because everyone's taste in music and art, and video games for that matter, is different, but I absolutely love this. There is so much soul in this stop motion story trailer that plays at the beginning. The main cutscenes to me are stunning. I love the use of the contrasting colors. It's just a vibe. And complementary to the art direction is the voice acting. It's very charming and something I've legitimately barely been exposed to. So seeing it all play out was pretty cool. But if you guys have been paying close attention to the gameplay, and I don't know if this is a result of them trying to accomplish that stop motion animation, there was quite a bit of screen tearing firing during my playtime, but luckily enough, that was one of the things that the devs addressed they're trying to fix, so I don't foresee that being a problem for this game at launch. But the one thing that I absolutely loved was the music, because the end of the chapter has you climbing up this tree that was once a person, and the whole time you're doing it, the music is building, which heightens the emotion to the story that's being told, and honestly, it's just beautiful. I think it's going to be the shining feature for the entire game. It's really that special. But now let's get into the combat, and full transparency, guys, I didn't fall in love with it, and that's because of a couple reasons, but I'm not weighing a definitive judgment on it because it was a very small section of the game and it was early on, but it did feel pretty basic. You have one attack combo, 3 unique abilities, and 1 ability you could unlock in your skill tree that had a small AoE. There were also some scenarios where you could target a creature like this hive on screen that would send out these little explodey bugs, and if you used your grab skill, you could actually grab one and throw it back at it to deal some area damage. There was also another enemy type that had a projectile attack, and you could use your push skill that would hurl the projectile back at that enemy. We got to experience 3 enemy types during this section of the game, and they did make the battle arenas pretty haphazard to the point where you need to prioritize which ones grief you most, otherwise you're going to have a rough experience. And the challenge was actually pretty surprising because you couldn't just hack and slash your way out because enemies would ultimately just attack you through your combos. And it really has you relying on your dodge ability. And I'm not kidding, dodging is your best friend. I died more times than I care to admit. However, my big issue with the combat is the targeting, because more often than not, I wouldn't lock onto the enemy that I intended, and it felt a bit clunky, and that in conjunction with the controls that kind of felt a bit loose made it more of a learning curve than I wanted it to be. It just felt like it left a little bit more to be desired, but optimistically thinking, if the skill tree unlocks some cool abilities and combos, I'm totally fine with this. And the game is reported to be about 12 hours long, so people could probably start deducing that 8 to 10 chapters isn't out of the realm of possibility, and if that's the case, the skill tree being the size that it is kind of makes sense. So for being a $40 game and 12 hours of gameplay, it's not really a bad deal at all, and it's going to be on Game Pass, so people that are already owners of that are getting a pretty unique and decently fun title being added to it. And lastly, I want to touch on a few questions from the viewers that I didn't quite hit on in the video. So CNF975 from Instagram asked if I was getting Coraline vibes from this game, and the answer is absolutely yes. When I saw the stop motion animation, I was instantly locked in. I had to play this game, so I think they absolutely killed it. I can't wait to see the polished, finished version of the game. So this is gonna be a very unique title, and I honestly hope it does well because I want to see more stuff like this down the future. And there is another game that has stop motion animation coming out. I'm not going to mention it in this video. I'll talk about it later on, but hopefully I can get my hands on that one. So Fat Guy with a Camera asked if I had to compare the fighting style of this game to something, what would it be? And to be honest, man, I cannot quite place it. I know I have played a game that feels like this, but I cannot remember it for the life of me. I wanted to say Devil May Cry, but this has like about 15% of the combat depth based off of what I played. And Juno Stafford asked about player choice and dialogue options, and there was actually none of that in this game, just cutscenes building and shaping the story how they wanted it to be heard. But yeah, guys, I just wanted to hop on here and share those thoughts with you. So if this is something you're looking forward to, I hope I helped enlighten you a little bit, or I probably just made you more confused, honestly. But if you guys liked the video, please drop a like, and I'm going to ask you guys to subscribe. And it also does not hurt to follow me on Twitter, Instagram, basically everywhere, because that's where I announce if I have these early accesses and where I'm going to pull questions from you guys into these videos. So if you want to be into the next video, actually the next one I'm doing is Avowed, which I'm going to start working on after this video, which is very soon. And if it's not already on the screen for you to watch, it'll be there eventually. So if you guys have any other questions, or if I left something out of this video that you would like to have seen, drop it down in the comment section. I'm very active in there as long as it's not toxic. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.